Hey. Hello, everybody. And we just got started on the conversation a little early. We are so glad to to be with you this evening. I'm so happy to have with me my dear sister friend, Eboné Carrington, who is the CEO of NYC Health and Hospital. She's also a trustee at FCBC. And so we are Pastor Mike wanted us to put something together to talk about women and wellness and specifically how COVID-19 is affecting us. So I'm so grateful, and we thought that the day after Mother's Day would be a great day. Hopefully you all had a wonderful Mother's Day, a memorable Mother's Day. But we recognize that specifically as African-American women and women in general, we just have to make sure that we are on top of our health. It's not just about us being spiritually strong, but we've got to be physically strong, mentally strong, and psychologically strong. So hopefully tonight on our conversation, Women, Wellness, and COVID-19, we're going to get some strength from one another and so that we can share that and then share with others. So I just want to welcome Eboné to FCBC platforms. Yay. We're excited to have you, and thank you for joining me and your patience with this process. And I'm just really going to just be asking you questions so that we can get a better idea of what's going on and how it impacts us directly and what we can do to make sure that we are prepared as well as we can be to deal with it. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you're currently doing.
Sure. Thank you. So first of all, thank you. And I want to thank my senior pastor, the Reverend Michael A. Walrond Jr., for allowing us to have this space and for thinking enough of the women in his life and in his congregation to separate and have a talk for us about us and how this has impacted and affected us in a different way. So thank you. And thank you, our Dr. Walrond, also for my work at NYTS as a trustee also. That's a part of my my early repertoire. So what people should know is that I do currently serve as the chief executive at New York City Health and Hospitals Harlem. A major aspect of the work that I do there is to oversee the strategic direction of the hospital, as well as its core operations around facilities management, emergency preparedness, and really overall vision setting and casting for the hospital. What we've just been doing for the past couple weeks or so is working in two cycles to, one, prepare ourselves and to rev up for coronavirus, which included a lot of preparedness activities, really including quadrupling our ICU capacity. And so it wasn't exactly ×4, but it was to the point where we exponentially increased our number of critical care beds. We have modified the hospital, and most hospitals have done this. So it just gives you a picture of what we've had to do to prepare ourselves. But we discontinued elective surgery. So there are people who thought they were going to get a procedure, and because of this, they have not. We have discontinued some aspects of visitation. And so there are people who want to see their loved ones and they cannot. And so as I share with you the things we've done in the hospital, I think it's a good way for us to tee up the conversation about what people may be feeling. And whether you are the patient or you are the caregiver or you just want to bring some hot soup to the patient, you can. And so there are a lot of people who are struggling with how to provide care, not just for themselves, but also for their family during this pandemic. I've watched my morgue capacity go up from 14 to 100 and something. So I really would say that the hospital has morphed into a critical care hub for some time. And now, as the apex has been addressed and is actually on the decline, we are now trying to figure out how to feverishly get the hospital back together and how to prepare ourselves to receive you again for all types of services. And really across the continuum of care, we haven't been doing a lot of behavioral health. So there's people out there that haven't seen their therapists. We haven't been doing some of the prepartum visits, and so, or the prenatal visits. And so some people, unless you're in a really high risk category, might have been having telephone visits only. And that can make you feel away. If you're a first time mom, I know that's how I used to feel. So I just offer that as I talk to you about what we've done as a hospital, each and every change that we've made has potentially impacted people who use our services and who live in our community and live and work here. So a lot of work has been done, and now a lot of recovery work has to be done, and a lot of healing. But that's pretty much what I do. And what I did in the past to get me there is for a different conversation, but it always included saying yes and answering the call. So that's pretty much about it.
You know, it's interesting. You that answer was so packed with information. And one of the things that really came up for me, which is a little bit outside of this conversation, is I'm thinking about all the women who were having health challenges before COVID-19 hit. So those who may have been dealing with, some form of cancer or high blood pressure or diabetes or heart problems or, breathing problems. And I'm wondering how marginalized maybe those folks are feeling during this time, because all of the attention is on COVID, because as you said, all of your beds, had to transition to treat those who are dealing with COVID. And so I guess I'm wondering, for those who were in a critical care position, how has this really impacted those women particularly?
So what we've seen is that those women have been very compliant, which is a tendency that we have. So if we're told don't come to the hospital, we're not going to come. If we're told try to stick it out at home, we're going to do that. And what I think responsible hospitals did was to have separated what was really urgent from what was non-urgent. And so we always continue to do, like I said, high risk OB or to do cancer procedures as needed. So what we tried to do was cull out who was most in need of the services and continue to provide them even during the pandemic. And that worked out for the most part. But what we are preparing for, both in our emergency department, our urgent care settings, and outpatient, is for people to come back much sicker than they were before. For folks who potentially had controlled diabetes, for it to be uncontrolled. For those who might have been reaching out for prescription refills and couldn't make it to the drugstore because they might have been sick themselves, or for fear. And I know we're going to talk about fear later, but there are some people who simply didn't venture out of their home because they felt as though they would contract this virus. So do you go get your antihypertensives? Do you go get your antipsychotics? Do there are just a lot of choices that have been made, and people now have to, as a result of those choices, put together recovery strategies. So as the hospital's recovering, people have to also recover their families and their headspace. So that's what I hope to talk about also.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to definitely get to this, the whole fear factor. But can you talk a little bit about how this pandemic is affecting women specifically, right? So as we were talking, we had gotten a jump start on the conversation before we knew we were live, and Ian was like, "You're live." But I was saying that, I'd read the statistic that said that more women are contracting the virus, right? But more men are, dying from the virus. So can you talk a little bit about, how it's affecting women in particular, and not only, the individual woman who gets affected, but for, I recognize that so many women are caretakers, are the primary caretakers of their family. So when their husband get infected, when their children or their mother, their parents, family, friends, and can you talk about how engaging in COVID-19 is affecting women, as well?
Sure. So one of the things I want to share is probably a thing that people don't think about, how it impacts and affects women. So while we are mostly in kind of in our culture, we see women as the matriarchs, and we know a lot of people who are the mother or the grandmother and the head of their house. However, I was very pleased to see that the Black family was very present during coronavirus. And what I saw, and what I'd like to highlight, because it's not something that's going to get attention somewhere else, and I know we always at FCBC like to get that nugget in that other people don't, is that people don't know how to respond or react to crisis. And while we are resilient, while we're strong, while we know how to continue to get up, we don't know how to write a will. So people were trying to find their loved ones. They didn't have any money. They didn't know where their insurance policy was. So I just want to say a word to women about wills and trusts. I want to talk about how to make sure you plan for a funeral, especially if you know your family is unaware or ill-equipped to do that on their own. There were a lot of people who I saw who simply were paralyzed by having a lack of technical skills to get their loved one out of the morgue, or to claim the body, or to negotiate with funeral homes and nursing homes also. But I've seen that. And so for the most part, I would like for women to really know, that black box that's under the bed that you don't know how to get into, open that box, know what's there, know what kind of policies your family has as an asset, and ensure that you're available as the beneficiary or as a person who is the executrix of the will. I just want to start talking in that language to people, because more than anything, I saw women who were really suffering to find the phone number and to figure out how to pay for something because their husband was the one who handled the business.
Wow.
So I was pleasantly surprised to see that subset of the Black community that sometimes we say is extinct or really needs to emerge differently is very present. And the women were very dependent on their husbands for the business aspects of their lives, and that has left them really in limbo. So I want to make sure I say that to everybody. Know what you have, know what your affairs are, know who to reach out to, and be able to navigate for yourself. So that's the first thing. And the second is that as caregivers, there were a few choices that needed to be made, specifically for people who were essential workers on the front line. So very recently something aired, and I don't see patients, but I have colleagues who have multiple children. So they had to worry about their children. They had to worry about contracting coronavirus. They then got coronavirus and had to figure out who was going to watch their children. And so when I talk about contingency planning and the need for emergency management to become something that's more a part of our general repertoire, we really do need to advance that, because people don't have support systems as we might have had in the past. Everyone can't say my mom's going to watch my child or my grandma's going to watch my child. And so we've seen families that really had to decide on whether or not their mother or their aunt keeps the job or quits to basically be with them, and now to ultimately homeschool them. And so the role of caregiver has manifested itself over and over, even within the same person and same circumstance. So there are daughters to older parents, and that concerns them. Their mother to younger children, and that concerns them. Their wives to Black and brown men who are getting this disproportionately, and who in the middle of their lives are succumbing to this illness. So I really watched where there's strength on one hand, there's a real vulnerability on the other. So as women, we just have to make sure, yes, we traditionally care for others, but care really means taking care of your head space, your house space, your professional space, and making sure that everybody around you is flexible and capable enough to work when you go down. And that's what I saw in a few of my colleagues, that their homes just weren't ready to be without them because there was no one else there.
Wow. And I heard you talking about wills. That's so important. Do you find that the women who are coming to your hospital, do they have living wills? Is that something that's, that you see more in men, that you see more in women? And what would you say around living wills? So, as Christians, we can get real technical with this whole notion of a living will, because there's one argument that, when it's your time to go, it's your time to go, and then others will say, do everything you can to keep me alive. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of living wills? Because I think what happens is, in our hesitancy to make that decision for ourselves, we're basically putting it in the hands of those who love us, trusting that they're going to come to the same decision. But what I've seen, as a pastor, when I'm called to pray for someone who's, at the hospital and the family is calling, is that, there's a lot of times when there's not really, consensus, right, on the best way forward. And so our, failure, right, or lack of responsiveness to putting together a living will then can also have negative implications on those who love us the most, and can leave them making some really, really hard decisions. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And there's two pieces to it that I want people to be able to separate. There's a component that we call advanced directives, or what would you like to happen in the event that you were incapacitated? And that's very clear. You can say, I want to be intubated, I want to be resuscitated, and you can put caveats around that, whether I have brain activity, if I feel like I will have, a meaningful life, and what does meaningful mean for people. I always say, if I can't think and I can't speak, then I'm not alive. And so there are just a lot of conversations that I know also in our community we don't have with people because it seems morbid, or we're trying to, my grandfather would be like, "Are you trying to kill me for my insurance money?" So I say, "No, you don't have any, by the way, but I want to know what you would like. I want to know how you want to, to be cared for." So advanced directives help you have the conversation, and there actually is a piece of paper that you can sign called the healthcare proxy that would put forward your wishes and would really talk about the person, the secondary and the tertiary contact for who the doctor or the care team can communicate with. So that's key. Then the second part is, I have 3 policies. I would like to be buried, or I would like to be cremated, or I would like for my oldest son to have his or his student loans paid back. So it's really important for us to let our wishes be known, and that simply is what a will is. It is to let your wishes be known. It is to think through how you want your legacy to be realized, and that's how I think we should start talking about decedent affairs or planning for death. And it doesn't have to be morbid. It really needs to be about caring for those people who are here after you so they don't have undue stress and burden. And if maybe we have the conversation and just flip the narrative a little bit to be one of positivity and preparedness and caregiving, then people will be a little bit more open to have the dialogue and to prepare the documents. But I think we should have a big old will party at the church one day, and get somebody to help us fill it out, even if it's just a 1-pager. There are going to be some things that I've seen happen in the medical world because of that 1-pager that makes it clear and unambiguous so that there isn't that lack of consensus.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think back in the day, people thought that wills were just for wealthy people. But the reality is that, they're something that we all need to have. And I appreciate you saying it. It doesn't have to be, morbid. It doesn't have to be sad or doom and gloom. It really can be, I lived a wonderful life. I want to make sure that when I leave this place, I'm leaving it in the best way for my family as possible. One of the things I remember, I believe it was Sean McMillan who preached at FCBC, and I'm trying to get rid of this light, and I don't know where it's coming from. Maybe this is who the Lord is upon me. But he talked about how Jesus not only taught us how to live well, but Jesus taught us how to die well. And there's something to be said about recognizing that death is a part of life. And one day it will be our destiny. One day it will be our destination, our final, well, not our final destination, but our final destination. But recognizing that that's important. And I want to say that, it's not that you have to go to an attorney and pay thousands of dollars to get a will made. You can write it in your handwriting. You can pull forms off the internet. They have made it so easy. You can do a Google search. And it's something that we should be thinking about, talking about, with our children, with our parents. Certainly so that we can be a little more prepared. You can never be fully prepared. But if there's one less thing I have to worry about, one less thing, while I'm grieving that I have to, pay attention to, then that would certainly be helpful. If there's one less thing the family has to disagree about, right, or argue about, then certainly that can be helpful, particularly during a time of mourning. You mentioned something earlier regarding this notion of balance, right? And how, I was just reading an article earlier that my husband sent me, and it was saying that one of the ways that we've slowed down the virus is by canceling schools, particularly for primary age children. And as long as there's no school, then we're going to have more parents who are going to stay at home to take care of those smaller children. We really haven't talked about the impact of this virus on children, right? So I definitely wanted to think about that, especially as we mother, recognizing that children hear more than we think they hear. They know more than we think they know. And this will be the generation that will come up in the midst of this pandemic. But there's another group that I wanted to highlight, who are somewhere along the margins as we move through this pandemic. And those are women and men, right? Children, who are dealing with issues of domestic violence, right?
Yes.
Because we recognize that is a reality. in our families. It touches all families. It's not just for Black families or white families. It's not just for rich families or poor families. It is a beast that has been with us and it's still with us. And I know I've read some articles around the fact that, at least when we're working, sometimes these folks who find themselves in these domestic violence relationships have, some type of respite. At least he's going to work, some type of respite. At least I have to go out, to the grocery store or whatever. And now with this stay-at-home order, my God, I think we're paying so much attention to the pandemic numbers that we are not even recognizing how domestic violence is increasing and how this type of stress and this type of stay-at-home order can have just such negative effects of those who are already struggling in those really tough relationships. Can you talk a little bit about, domestic violence and women specifically?
Sure. So what we've seen both in the children of abusers who used to free and flee in school,
Mm,
and partners of the abusers are that they're now all in the same very confined space.
mhm,
And not only does it take nothing for an abuser to get triggered, this is not nothing. This is, you might have lost your job, you are feeling away. I don't negate the absence of sports in the life of people who love sports. So I'm not going to say that that's just male dominant because I miss my sports too, but they have no sports, they have no outlet. You can't go to the barbershop. And I just offer that the things that we all do to decompress have been taken, including the gym for people who are very into their health and wellness in that way. So this is so important because your house has now become a hotbed for trouble. I mean, the dishes aren't done. The
mhm,
light bulb goes out. It could be anything. And so, what we've tried to do is make available resources to women. So we continue to leave open our crisis line. We have a mobile crisis team. Um, I would draw people's attention. I don't know if it's open or not to places like the Mayor's Office of Domestic Violence or the Family Justice Center. So there always has to be a place for you to go. And right now, even with the shelters that are overcrowded, I believe there's always hope and space if you want to free yourself from that situation.
mhm,
The police are available and aware. There are groups that are small and local to Harlem, like Warm, We All Really Matter, that we're familiar with. Then there are larger groups for respite. So I would definitely say what we've seen is a prevalence of domestic violence and also child abuse in this space. And that's coupled with increased drug and alcohol utilization, which puts you in a place where your impulse control is low, where your triggers and your stressors are high. And so this is just not an ideal situation for anyone. But I wanted to make sure that I gave some airtime to, because you described it perfectly, by the way. So you pretty much did a good job yourself. But around the children, I just want to say that we have to ask our kids how they're feeling. We have to ask them what's happening in those minds of theirs, because they are processing really sudden and traumatic separation from their class. So these kids never thought school would close. So on like a Wednesday, they went to school. The question was, are we going to be open on a Thursday? And now the answer is we will not be returning to school until the next academic year, I'm hoping. So that's really hard for children who have separation anxiety. Everyone doesn't learn the same way. In a moment of vulnerability, which I always say I will share with you my truth. I have a 4-year-old and I'm not an early childhood education teacher. And so I'm struggling now with the connection of, I know how to impart morals. I know how to impart what's right or wrong, but the patience to talk with a 4-year-old about letters and numbers when they're not in school and there's no one else in the class to influence them, that's a lot. And sometimes we just say we're going to stop today and we're going to start again. There's no failure. Because I just, I can't. And so what I want to say, if I may, to that woman who, like me, is going to get home at about 8:30, Google Classroom awaits us because you don't want your child not to complete their assignment.
mhm,
And so when you're a non-traditional mom and you have non-traditional hours, as long as the assignment gets in, that's okay. If you are trying your best to teach your child and they're just not getting it, that's okay. Because what they will remember more than the letters or numbers you're teaching them is that during the spring and summer of 2020, they spent time with their mom at home. Or they spent time with their grandma at home, and you taught them about home lessons and life lessons and recipes. And so I would just say to everybody, like I've seen death. right in his face. I have an open unit that I talked about that I call the Valley of the Shadow of Death. I have 11 beds in an open room, and everybody was on a ventilator, and everybody ended up dying. And I stood there for a while, and I took it in, because when they say the word can live among you, I felt that. I felt that, and I felt that I feared nothing. I feared no evil. I knew we wouldn't succumb to this, but I'm going to say I saw that. So everything else is not that important to me anymore. So if the Google Classroom, mom at home is not done, that's okay. If you are taking care of yourself, if you got up and took a good shower, if you took a nice walk today, that's okay. You have done more than enough. So I just want everyone's bar to not raise. I want everybody to calibrate their goals and their expectations to their best effort. And so in that season, I'm very much not an A for effort individual in the workplace, and I will tell people that. But in this season, I'm an A for effort at life. Live your life, take your shower, wash your own hair, do your little nails and your crusty feet, do everything that you need to do. Give it your best. And that's all I'm saying, because I'm speaking for myself because they're pretty crusty.
Yeah, you know, it's real. I crack up sometimes watching these videos that I see of these, moms putting, uploading these videos. And this one particular woman was just saying, you know what, I'm sick of the homeschooling. I am not a teacher. I don't know this stuff, and now she said, you're sending home a score. What am I supposed to do? Play my trumpet? What am I, orchestra director? What is going on? What do you expect from me? And then she said, and now my child knows that, I don't know everything. Like my ignorance is being exposed, So what is this new math? What do you mean you don't carry the one anymore?
Yeah.
And so there are moms who are really, really having this challenge, right, of trying to manage it all. And you said it, how are you going to do it all? Things that you're used to other people doing for you, like your nails, like your hair, like your pedicure, that now you're having to do yourself. I've seen a lot of people go natural in this season. A lot of people with letting their grow out during the season. Well, it's time for me to be gray. Because they can't get to the beauty salon. I refuse to wear an open toe shoe right now because I try to do the best I could with them, but I just can't do it, like they can. And so I agree. I think affirming that you got up, that you took a shower today, that you were able to love on your children. If you have the choice between loving on your children and teaching them 4 + 5, love on your children. Right?
Yep.
Love them. If you have to close the book so that you don't yell at them because they got the problem wrong, or they didn't put the period, or they forgot to capitalize the T, then close the book and just love on them, because that's what they're going to remember most. They're not going to remember, exactly what you taught them, that you taught them photosynthesis, but they will remember that you hugged them, that you kissed them, that you told them it was okay. Because the same way that we're stressed out, right, is the same way that it's manifesting in our children. You think it's hard for us sometimes to concentrate? Absolutely, it's hard for them as well. So that's not to give them an excuse or a pass not to do their best, but it's for us to understand that during this season, we cannot set the bar so high for ourselves and so high for our children that we're not leaving room for them to figure out how to live in this new world that is ever evolving. Right? It's one of the things I love about our identity statement, is that we're ever evolving. Well, guess what? If we didn't know we were living in a world that was ever evolving before, we do now. Absolutely, we know that we are now. And so I want to go right into this notion of mental wellness, right, and mental health, because I heard you say, if you went for a walk, give yourself a pat on the back. If you did any exercises, give yourself a pat on the back. And so how do we, right? Because I found myself, and I even told my husband the other day, I said, sometimes I just feel like crying, right? Because we're taking all of this information in. This many people died, this many people have the coronavirus. These states are opening up, and we're internalizing, frustration. We're internalizing, anger, even in some cases. Why are you opening up, some things that I may be more prone to go to, as opposed to my brothers or sisters, from another mother, right? And so we're internalizing, we're taking all this information in, And I guess you can, as a healthcare professional, speak to us what happens when we take all of that bad news, all of that negativity, all of those things that are frustrating us, and then on top of that, then we get a phone call that an auntie died, or a cousin is in the hospital, or another pastor died. There have been pastors all around New York, all around the world, bishops and
Yeah.
denominations that are dying. So you're internalizing all of this. What are some things that you recommend that we as women can do to release that stress and that anxiety and that frustration from our bodies?
So I'm gonna take a page out of my other pastor's book, Pastor Kendra, because she's who I go to, because sometimes I'm here and she just knows how to bring you all the way down. So big shout out to PK. The first thing I think I would like everybody to appreciate is what triggers them. So the beginning of every episode where you become sad, mad, glad, or anything else, it comes a trigger. Some stimulus comes your way that either makes you feel happy or dissatisfied in some way. And during this time, I want everybody to understand their triggers have gone like from there to here. So the thing that bothered you about your loved one, the thing that bothered you about your working from home, the thing that bothered you about your kids are going to be exacerbated because you're in a small confined space with them and there's nowhere else to go. So the thing that we're used to be able to do is be busy. And that's why I wanted to say to most women, whether you're busy or not, you find a way to keep moving as a way to not confront, to not observe, to not come to grips with what's really going on inside you. And some of the most well adjusted women that I know take a lot of time to introspectively look at themselves so that in times like this, they can calibrate differently. So I would say, really know yourself. Take this time to really get inside what makes you tick. And then you'll know what's troubling you. So if it's, I don't like to be bothered in the morning. I really like to be able to accomplish something first. I'm already feeling a certain way. Then make sure that you express that. I think two things that can grow in a beautiful way from this pandemic are communication and engagement, because we have no other choice but to engage. So let's not think of it as though we're stuck together. Let's think of it as we have been given time to spend with one another in a way that can help us help ourselves. So that's that one piece. But the second is to know your triggers. If things get on your nerves, if things really bother you, if you're gaining weight is a problem, then make sure that you know I'm only going to gain these 5 pounds, because once these 5 pounds come, then there's going to be something else that happens. And so a lot of times people feel out of control in periods of crisis. The federal government controls what you wear on your face outside, where you can actually go, where your kids can go, and when anything else is going to open up around you. That is a very, very vulnerable place to be as a people. And then as a woman, for you sometimes to have that role, because sometimes we opt into a subservient role. Sometimes that's the role that's been crafted for us. Sometimes that's the role that we simply occupy. But when you have no control outside and no control inside, you better have a plan for how to offset yourself and your triggers. So that's the first thing. Know yourself, know your triggers. Take an opportunity to figure out, without psychoanalyzing yourself, what got you there. So what has made you so impatient? For me, it's, I always think I have to be somewhere. I always feel I have to do something. Even now, like I would love to be at quarantine for 3 days right now, just home, doing nothing. But for me, it's, I'm constantly moving. So when I get tired, I flip out. So I have to make sure I rest. I have to make sure at a certain point, if my son is still awake, I have to say to my husband, you have to put him down. Because if I don't get the sleep, tomorrow is going to be a problem at work. Tomorrow night is going to be a problem at home. And then I won't even have enough to be able to bring myself to the table. So it's really about cause and effect. What causes your anxiety? What causes your fear? What causes your discomfort? And then what do you do to offset that? If that's meditation, if that's a walk, if that's a jog, if that's writing in your journal, and all of these things I throw out because I don't do them myself. I don't have a lot of outlets. And my outlet was church. And then church got taken. So I say all that to say, if I love work, if I didn't have work, I don't know how I would be. I don't know if I would be okay. And for people who really are driven off of their work, or off of the career, or off of the destiny that God's given them, then that's been hampered. And so now you got to come to terms with that. So I just feel like being really honest with yourself, being in real open dialogue, as Pastor tells us all the time with God about how we're feeling, and that doesn't have to be over churchy, that you can just be like, I'm really sad right now. I feel really overwhelmed right now. I'm not entirely sure why this lump is in my throat. I don't even know if I'm picking up on my energy or on the energy of my girlfriend that's struggling and I didn't know about it. So as women, I think we're very empathic. I think we pick up on a lot of the energy of the world. And I do not listen to a lot of news anymore. I think you have to really, you already know what coronavirus is about. By the end of this meeting, we'll have more understanding of what coronavirus is about. And every day, maybe you don't spend 8 hours watching about coronavirus because there's really no positive uptick in anything yet. So yes, the apex is gone, but we haven't opened yet. People haven't stopped dying yet. So you're not really getting amazing stories of affirmation. And so later, I hope to talk about what we're doing in healthcare settings to try to talk through that stigma and to try to give some positive energy and just a shot in the arm to our healthcare staff every day in small ways. And you need to do the same thing for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. I think that, and one of the things I've heard women say is, well, I really don't meditate. I've never really sat down and breathed, but this may be the time to learn some new habits, and start some new rituals. And so the difference in having that quiet meditation, sitting quietly by yourself, wherever. I remember when my children were small, and I'm guessing they were probably around 5 and 2 or 4 and 1, something like that. And I just, oh my God, even thinking about it makes me hold my head like this. But I remember the only place that I could get any solace was in the bathroom. And so, really, no matter where I went, if I was in the kitchen, they were following me in the kitchen. If I was in the living room, they could get to me. So the only solace I had was going in the bathroom. And so once they got a little bit older, I feel like around 2 or 3-ish, and I could tell them to sit tight for a few minutes. That was back in the day when children listened. When you told them to sit down, they actually sat down. And I would tell them, I'm going to take a bath. Mommy is going to take a bath. Do not disturb me. And I remember that was my solace. I would go in, I'd run a bubble bath. I would put some music on. I'd put a nice Barney video in or something for them so that they can engage in and be safe. And tell them, listen, do not knock on the door while mommy's in the bathroom unless it's an emergency. And I remember when I first started doing that, they would come knocking, mommy. I was like, is it an emergency? Is anybody hurt? Is anybody crying? Is anybody bleeding? Okay, so then mommy's going to see you in just a few minutes. And after doing that, I guess for maybe a week or so, they got accustomed to my having my quiet time, my quiet bath time. And that's what did it for me. And so for people who are saying, I can't go outside or I don't have any space, you can create your space. Wherever that is, carve it out. Make time for yourself. Go in there and breathe. Listen to a song. Say a prayer. Write in your journal. I hear people say, well, I'm not big on writing. Someone gave me a great idea about 2 weeks ago. And she said, have you thought about video chronicling? Video journaling. So instead of writing, just 30 second to 1 minute video of yourself every day. So there's so many ways to get it out, but we gotta get it out. We can't just take in and keep taking it in and keep taking it in.
Switch up the recipes. If you love to cook and you just switch it up, just your fried chicken becomes grilled chicken. Try one new recipe every 2 weeks. There is something that everybody can do to help themselves in this time. And it really just requires a very intentional change to the perspective. And to the point of view. So I would say if you are currently in the land of the living, I just praise God for you. If your loved ones have come out of the hospital, even if they're in a rehab center, we thank God for them. So in this season, you made it. Like that's the first part of it. Like you have all the strength you need already. So now let's actually not fall victim to the time, but let's navigate this time. Let's take control of it. Find the things that you want to accomplish, that you want to get out of this. I will say, I also know a lot of people, and I've seen in this space, a lot of people don't have resumes. So like our health system just recently took on the testing for all of New York City. And they're going to be the detectives around the virus. And there were 5,000 jobs. And a lot of there were 5,000 jobs, of which 7,000 people already applied. But at the time, I said to a few people, you've been asking for a job, do you have a resume? And this is the time for you to put your resume together. This is the time for you to craft a document that you can use to help sell who you are if you don't have a lot of work experience. So like I said, put your hand to the plow in a different way during this season to prepare you for some form of recovery. And when you do that, I think that so much more added value is perceived in this time than just falling victim to the quarantine.
Absolutely. And I want to add before we leave this topic and go on to, because I see people typing and they're talking about this weight they've been gaining. So that's what we're going to.
I'm up here today.
But I want to say, you know what? We are in the information technology age. Take advantage of the information technology. YouTube has everything. You can learn to salsa on YouTube. You can learn to play the piano on YouTube. You can learn to paint on YouTube. You can all kinds of recipes that actually show you how to do it and how to stir and what it looks like. And so, you know, while we're tweeting and while we're Instagramming and while we're Snapchatting, you know, and while we're doing all of these other things, we can also do something that's going to sow seed into us as well. So make sure you're taking advantage of those opportunities. Just if you don't have anything to do, you know, get on Google. What can I do right now? Get on, and they'll tell you, Google will tell you, don't go for a walk today, you know. So, but I'm seeing when you were talking about this weight gain, right? Somebody else is saying, I'm eating. And if you guys have questions, please put them up and we'll try to get to your questions as well. So I know for me, for sure, that first month, I was eating my way through this pandemic, hands down. I was snacking on some things that I don't even normally eat.
Yes.
Eating just because of the anxiety around, you know, when everything was initially forming. But I know not only are we eating more, right? We're drinking more.
Yep.
Folks are using more, right?
Yep.
During this period. So talk a little bit about how we manage those impulses that send us to places that seem comfortable, right? Whether we're eating and we're eating when we're not even hungry because it's comforting, or we're drinking, you know, we're drinking by ourselves, right? Because it's comfortable, or we just, get back in the habit of using whatever it is. How can we manage that? What can we look for? How can we tell if it's getting to an extreme? What do you think?
So I first start off by saying I'm speaking my own truth because I truly gained my own legit COVID-19. My COVID-19 pounds are on my physical person. However, I will tell you, it came from comfort eating. And then it also came, as a lot of women will identify with, when you're very tired and you still have to move forward. It's what women exhibit when they are when they have very young children or when they breastfeed. You sometimes have to power through your day in such a way that food is what's fueling you to stay up and to stay moving. So you're drinking the extra large coffees when you were drinking the smalls. And I say this because everything can be relegated back to a behavior and a habit change. So when you're mindful of what you're consuming and you're mindful of why you're consuming it, then you can offset it. And what I would say to everybody is give yourselves a little bit of a break. We are going through a humanity-centric catharsis right now. People are just pouring their hearts out. They're telling us their vulnerabilities. They're talking about what's going on. We have collective PTSD. Every one of us is traumatized in a way where we could easily go through a certain number of sessions in order to really feel better before we re-enter the workspace. So I want everybody to say, minus true professional help, your awareness is the most important thing. A lot of people have been sleepless. And what I've heard in talking to people, really because we share a lot at the hospital level and we're also talking to patients and their families, they can't sleep. Their minds don't shut down. And so what we've heard is that people are taking NyQuil and Benadryl and 2 glasses of wine every night to get to sleep. And so once you start with that, you become dependent, your body becomes habit forming, and that's where you are today. The most important thing is to say, okay, now I'm going to change my narrative. Now I'm going to rethink the habits, the behaviors. I'm aware, and I've got to check into another zone. So this is about a gear shift. This is probably the most forgiving Eboné Carrington on the whole earth, but it's because all of the other stuff is not important anymore. Yeah. So if you have picked up too much to drink, then now put it down. If you have relapsed, you knew what to do the first time, so you can seek help. And it's not to trivialize or relegate this to just stop and start, but you knew what triggered you. And so now it's about looking at those triggers and addressing it. Anytime you're doing something every day, is a form of excess. So yes, a glass of wine before bed every day, next week is going to be two, because the one glass doesn't get you tired anymore. So that's what habit forming behaviors do. And that could be pills, that could be talking to people, that could be gambling. A whole bunch of people have taken up new habits of gambling online. And they have these games on social media and people buy into them. And so people want to be a part of something. People really want to get outside. They really want to be a part of something. You never know what that brings them to, or why they drink, or why they do those things. So I would just say knowledge and awareness,
Mhm.
understanding that you have to have a definitive line in the sand that says this is enough for me. So no one's going to stop until they hit their own stopping point. Doesn't always have to be rock bottom. Sometimes it's circumstantial and situational. And I'm just talking very straight with you. But people now just have to realize, okay, you're not going to die. Corona's going to be around. We're going to figure out how to live with Corona. Don't allow that to be the reason you go to the refrigerator. Don't let Corona be the reason you go to the liquor store every day. So if that's your personal choice, I just want people to not be fooling themselves that this is like Rona sent me to the liquor store.
Yeah.
So now at this point, this is you walking to the liquor store. So now, prior to coronavirus or anything else, you would have had to reconcile yourself going and seeking those things, and you now have to reconcile it in the same way. And big shout out to Celebrate Hope. I hope there's some way that they could connect with people, but I believe AA and NA are still available. I know that there are some remote platforms for that. We continue to have a substance abuse outpatient program. So I just offer that if people need help, they should get it, but also don't beat yourself up, but just mid-course correct. So every Monday, I seem to be starting my diet. I'm really going to do it Monday, so we can all hold one another accountable when we see each other in the street.
You sound like me. My husband was like, "No, when are we gonna start working out?" I was like, "Okay, Monday."
Monday, yeah, Monday's always the right day until Sunday comes, and it's like,
Right.
so, yeah.
Yeah. So then let's talk about, right, this notion of fear, right? You said you wanted to come back to fear. And also I'll put that in alignment with trauma as well, right? So not the same, but they affect one another, and one can affect the other even adversely. And I saw someone put in the comments here the notion of PTSD, and how COVID is triggering in women, particularly this fear. For some of us, it's even the loss of control that can absolutely, drive you insane. The fact that we are having to self isolate, the fact that I can't go to my job, even if I want to. And so this notion of restriction, but outside of restriction, how restriction can then also instill a fear in us, right? And it's easy as a pastor for me to say, God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of love and of power and a sound mind. But then when you go to the grocery store and the person on the aisle with you is coughing and doesn't have a mask on, and you're in there with your mask and gloves, and it can get you, nervous. The trauma, the PTSD, the fear. And I know there are folks who have not left their apartments, their condos, their homes since all of this started. Nearly 50, 60 days now we're in. So talk a little bit about, I can talk about the spiritual response to fear, but talk a little bit about strategies that can help us, move within our fear, right? Move within our trauma. It's not that we can get over it, but how do we live within it? How do we not allow it to control us, but allow it to push us to be our best selves?
So I had read a quote some time ago that said, fear rests in the storehouse of wisdom. And so where there's fear, there's some valid, legitimate, unless you're like not with us in the realm of reality. There's something that's legitimately scaring you. There's something that you've seen that puts a fear factor in your thinking. There's something that someone's told you that you can't accomplish. So again, knowing that fear comes from a place usually that's fair and valid, we have to now just spin our approach to how we label it, how long we keep it, and then what we do with it. So we can't keep fear. We can't make it a tool. We can't wield it. No one can help you get past your fears, but you have to understand what about it is causing you concern. And then basically deconstructing that in such a way that would help you understand and appreciate how you can overcome it. it's like a work plan. And so I'm afraid that I'm going to contract corona. However, I'm going to stay in the house. I'm going to make sure that I'm separate. The thing about somebody sneezing in the grocery store, if I'm really far away, I might feel like, phew, I averted that crisis. So when you really start to take the things and deconstruct them into bite-sized pieces that you can either address or that you can decide to put down, or that you really have to, in some cases, ignore, because you're not going to be able to get past that thing. And that's when I say, sometimes people say, I think I'm going to get corona. Let me just turn this TV off. Good, turn that TV off, because that constant feed of information might be causing that fear. Sometimes you might have to stop talking to that girlfriend. Like, we know I love my mother, but my mother is a news watching woman right now. And so every day, this is what Cuomo just said, and this is what, so I have to say, I know, and you have to be able to appreciate what you can intake and what's going to cause fear, because there were times when she was like, this is getting crazy. I said, you don't have to go to work tomorrow, right? Like, I have to get up and push through. So sometimes you just have to know where it's coming from. And so if it's coming from a good place, address it. Also understand that I have used fear to catalyze great steps that I have taken. So I have been afraid to do things, but I realized the fear was because of the unknown, or I realized that the fear was because of something that was fabricated and created within me, and I had to just offset it. So I don't know if I've ascended to this like Zen Buddha place in my life where it's like you can always figure out what's ailing you. And if you are truly afraid of something, then you just have a choice. There's fight, there's flight, or there's figure it out just a little bit. And for fear, I want everybody to give it space, but don't let it occupy your time. And so you got to figure out how to offset it. And in many cases, it's about discussing it. And so conversations like this with someone, or even, again, I think fear can come out sometimes through journaling. Why am I afraid to go outside? Do I think I'm going to get it? Why am I afraid? Why am I not sleeping? And you have to really get to your causal factors about what's really gotten you there. And that's an exercise that, I leave you all with one exercise of the 5 whys.
I was just about to say that. Yes.
Yourself to the 5 whys, and it's what we're taught in performance improvement. It's what you're taught in executive coaching, and it helps you get down to what problem is most important for you to address, so that the weeds don't keep coming up. And if you just say, I'm afraid of failing. Why? Because my dad didn't like me to fail. Why? Because he didn't want to fail. Why? Because when he was young, this happened. And you get all the way down to your father's childhood trauma is the reason that you yourself don't want to learn how to do something new. And so the reason that I offer you that 5 why scenario is because I've had to say to myself, like, why am I this way? And it comes down to something somebody told me one day, or something that I observed or that I took on. And then I had to realize, from a wise woman, don't pick up stuff that doesn't belong to you. So if you saw her fail, or you saw her minimized, then that was her. You don't have to automatically take that on. So I would just say, don't wear stuff that's not your size. If that's not your fear, don't take it on. Yes. Learn what your fears are, and then just talk through them and work on them. And everything's a work in progress. It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah. What I was thinking about the 5 whys as you were talking, because I was thinking, and in my mind, I don't want to go out. I'm afraid to go outside. Like, I haven't even been to the grocery store. Why? Because I don't want to get COVID. Why? Because I don't want to die. Why? Because I leave my son here and I'm a single mother. Why? Because there's so much more I need to teach him that he needs to learn. Well, you know what? Get started with that work, right?
Yep.
When you get started with that work, the other pieces will begin to work themselves out. So that is something that I have picked up. I actually picked that up from my husband, and I have carried with me. Those 5 whys will get you to the root cause of absolutely what's going on. All right, so we only have a few minutes left. I want to ask another question, then I'm going to open it up for what you want to tell us as you prepare to leave. We got about another 10 minutes or so. We hear all of this talk about testing, right? Mm-hmm. And even today, I was walking past the television, right, and the volume was muted. But I read the caption, and it said, President says that very soon everybody will be able to be tested every day at work, right? because he's trying to get the nation. I know, right? All I could do was I did just what I'm doing now. Just laughed and just kind of put, but in terms of testing, right? Who should be getting tested? When should we be getting tested? If you're feeling 100% fine, is that the time to go get tested? Because you're scared you're asymptomatic. What should be some good guidelines, and if there's anything specific to women that we need to consider when we make that decision of whether or not we need to go and be tested?
It doesn't differ by gender, so this is a general statement around testing. If you feel ill and if you have symptoms that are related to coronavirus, which at the time were fever, cough, sore throat, and some headaches or muscle aches, feelings like flu or influenza-like illness, then it's always good for you to consult with your provider. And the diagnostic tests you can come and get, but why I say that's not as important perhaps as the antibody test is because for you to know whether you're positive or negative in a quarantined environment presumes that you do nothing different. You're already separate, you're already masked, you're already out of work, and so the likelihood that you would pass it on, especially if you live at home or with a small number of people, is relatively low because you're taking all of the precautions.
Yeah.
Where we have to begin to rev up our awareness and heighten just our sensitivity to everything around us is when we begin to re-enter the workforce. And the logic behind the blood test or the antibody test is to simply say to you at an immediate point in the past or a few months ago, so you can have the IgG or the IgM, you had coronavirus and your body has produced antibodies to offset it. We still don't know if that means you can't get it again. We still don't know if that's every strain. So as we study this and watch it, the answers remain very uncertain. I think that the entire community over time will need to get tested because we need to see where prevalence is like. So we need to know the prevalence in certain communities, certain zip codes, certain genders, and ethnic breakdowns. So we do want to know the difference between the greater Harlem community and the Brooklyn community. I know that we've done some preliminary data that says that PPE has worked very well in the hospital because only 5% more people in the hospital have it than the neighborhood, which means community spread was the logical means of transmission or the vector. So I think everybody will get tested eventually before the city opens up. That's why they've revved up testing capacity, because you just kind of want to know your status and you want to know if you've ever had it. The question is, do you still go to work if you had it? The question is, does that mean you cannot get it? The question is, do we start testing children who really are now new vectors with symptoms that don't look like they did before?
Yes.
So as the science emerges, the jury's still out on what this looks like and what the likelihood of complete assimilation are. But like I'm saying, I'm not taking my mask off this year, nor is my child. I might not reoccupy a movie theater or a concert. I will definitely go to church if church is open. And I'm definitely going to come to work, but I will continue to exercise precautions because I'm so aware of the unknown. And I want everybody to get that. Don't let your frustration get the best of you. I'm seeing people take their masks off. I'm seeing people say, I'm tired of this. If I get it, I get it. You don't want that. If you get it, you get it, could potentially be a death sentence. And there's no logic behind who succumbs to this illness. So I just want everybody to stay careful. Testing will occur so that you know. That testing gives you a moment in time snapshot, and it will let you know if you ever had it in the past. But what it looks like for the future, we don't know. So I would say, as people get tested in the community, everybody should know their status. So I know that there are 2 or 3 testing sites in Harlem. We've just opened our testing this morning at Harlem Hospital proper. But it's not as important as it is to be careful, and as it is to stay in when you don't feel well, and as it is to make sure that you really are not wiping your eyes or wiping your nose and touching surfaces, that you wipe things down in your home, that you stay in when you can, where it's healthy. And then when you get tired and stir crazy, go outside for a little while, but don't go outside with other people. Don't go to other people's houses. You know, these are just the things that I know we're going to want to do. It's starting to get nice out. It's my fear. You know, Harlem on a nice day is a bad place. If you want to keep people apart. So I just grow more and more nervous by the day. But as people just can be smarter and be more compliant, then I feel better about reopening.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. Do you have any other words? Is there anything that we didn't get to? I know we were talking about definitely having an appreciation for the healthcare workers and
Mhm.
all that they're going through. And I know you all get that huge applause at 7 o'clock
Yeah.
each night, and I'm sure that brings smiles to everyone's faces. But is
Mhm.
there anything else you want to share with us, or are there any points you want to leave with us tonight?
Um, I would say to those individuals who are in a relationship, to those individuals who are married, and to those individuals whose situations are stressing them, keep trying, work, talk, communicate,
Mhm.
um, and don't let this be the thing that separates you. There can be other things that separate you, but don't let fierce closeness with the person that you once loved very, very much be anything that drives you apart. So I would just offer the nerves are being got on during quarantine. Okay. The nerves have been addressed, but how you address the nerves is really, really important. And I want to make sure that people know you got to work. You have to really try your humble best to keep the right tone and space in your home. And the
Right.
second thing is that the caregivers, even if they're in your family, if they're your neighbors, there are people, nurses, doctors, respiratory therapists, who have seen excessive amounts of death and dying in ways that they can't cope.
Mhm.
Some people want to leave the profession. Some people simply can't take that pace, that last patient's, face out of their remembrance. There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of baggage. There are a lot of things on people's sleeve right now. And so if you do have a loved one who works in healthcare, specifically one that was on the front lines, just talk to them. Ask them what they saw, ask them what was one of the best stories they could tell you. And sometimes people feel like other people don't want to know. And
Mhm.
what we have at this hospital is a support group called Helping Healers Heal, which talks to the second victim, which in many cases is the doctor of death or of medical errors. And we have found that that support is really next level. But a lot of them say, "I'm glad you asked me because I didn't want to burden my wife with this, or I don't want to burden my mother with this." One woman said to me, "I'm an Asian woman and we don't talk about death and dying or mental health. So I don't have anybody to talk to." And so I would just say to you, if you know people who work in hospitals, even when they say I'm fine, just pull something positive out of them. You don't have to say, how many people died around you, but you can say, what was one of your best stories of
Mhm.
resilience? What was one of the things that made you most proud about working in healthcare in this moment? And so what I would like to leave you with is an 83-year-old woman named Miss Dixon, who we did something here called the Presence Project, which came from FCBC. And it was created so that no patient died by themselves, because the nurses and the doctors were beginning to feel guilty leaving their one patient to go and care for another as this patient died. And so a group of us volunteered to be with patients as they died. And we got called from Miss Dixon, and we went upstairs, and I was, very quiet. And I said, "You're a Christian woman." And she was like, "I'm not dying." She was like, "I want to live. I need to get my nails done when Yonkers opens back up." She had a silk nightgown on and she had red nails. And she goes, "You can stay if you want, but I'm not dying. So if you want to stay, you can, but I'm going to live." And every day for like 3 weeks, I came in every day like, Miss Dixon died. And Miss Dixon got discharged. And I want to give you that because Dixon had grandchildren who FaceTimed her every day. She had a 50-year-old child. She had 20-year-old grandchildren, and her reach was equally important to all people that she encountered, myself included. So you don't have to have, this woman basically said, "I didn't have any education, but she was magnetic and she was resilient." And she's just a woman who I think we all can find some connection to. And so for Miss Dixon, just like keep persevering and don't own the label, because we went up there to give Miss Dixon her last rites, and she was like, "I'm not dying. Someone's mistaken." And she sent me right on my business, and Miss Dixon got discharged. So I would offer that to all of you. You can have your own Miss Dixon moment. You have to grab
Wow. Well, shout out to Miss Dixon if you're watching, or if it's passed on to you, because clearly you have made a difference in our sister Eboné's life. And certainly her sharing that story brought a smile to my face. I hope
it.
we're all smiling. I appreciate that. It made me think about, Game of Thrones. I was a big Game of Thrones fan. You too? Okay. So, when Arya was training, but I
Yeah.
can't remember the guy who was training her, and he said, "What do we say to death?" And she said, not today.
Hey, that's right.
So that's what Miss Dixon was saying, not today. She didn't necessarily have promises for 2 weeks down the road or 3 weeks down the road. It ended up being that she was discharged, but she just said that day, not today. And that's what we have to say to our fear, not today, to our anxiety, not today, to the death of our dreams, not today, you know, to even our spouse getting on our nerves, not today. Hallelujah. I'll share this as we prepare to go. I shared this I do prayer on Saturday mornings with the FCBC prayer line at 7:15. That's a plug for y'all. Every morning at 7:15, we have prayer, and it's led by each of the pastors. But I was sharing that I was having a brunch with one of my girlfriends, and I hadn't talked to her in months. And we decided to do a Zoom brunch. And so we're there talking, and she was asking me, how are things going? And I said, oh, you know, it's tough, you know, being at the school, you know, we have to transition everybody to online and making sure that professors are prepared and making sure we're taking care of the students. And, you know, we had to change our graduation date. So I'm just going on and on about all the challenges, you know, that I was having. And I said, working home can be a little stressful. Sometimes we're both, you know, in meetings, and I'm telling him, can you be quiet, a little quiet? He's telling me, I can hear you. Can you be, you know, so, you know, all of these pieces are going on. And so I was like, and how are you doing? And she was like, Keisha, I am so blessed. She was like, you know what? I'm so grateful because I normally have this, you know, 45-minute commute to work. And now I don't have that commute anymore. So I'm saving 2 hours in my day. So now I'm able to read more and to catch up on some of the writing that I like to do. And girl, you know, working from home, not having to get ready and go, I can just go right to my office. She said, and I'm home with my best friend. Talk about her husband. I'm home with my best friend, and we're able to get up in the morning and have coffee together. And normally we would be able to do that because we leave at different times, and we take our break and we have lunch, girl. And so we're spending more time together. You know, I'm sitting here looking at her like, are you serious right now? She's like, yes. And girl, we're cooking more. So I'm cooking and I'm finding recipes, and he'll find recipes, and I cook, and he'll clean. And oh my gosh, we are just seeing our bank account increase because we're not going out to eat as much, you know, not having to pay these tolls, you know, just saving, you know, so much money. And praise God, neither one of us has been laid off, you know, but we live below our means so that if we are laid off, we're prepared for that. Girl, God is so good. And I was just sitting there listening to her like, seriously? Yeah. If she ever got on my nerves, she got on my nerves that day. Yeah. But then I had to take a step back and say, you know what? Well, I had to ask myself the 5 whys. Why am I mad at her?
Right.
She's feeling so blessed, you know, because I'm having a hard time right now. Well, why am I having a hard time right now? You know, because I've got so many challenges. Well, how do you have some, you know, so I'm asking myself these questions, and it came back to, well, you know what? I could be a little bit more grateful about all the things that are going well instead of focusing so much attention on all of my challenges, right? Because the challenges are going to be there. They're going to come. You ain't got to look for them. They're going to come. They're going to knock on your door and say, hello, good morning. How you doing? Good evening. I'm here to stay with you for a while. But man, if you could think about how you're blessed, if you're healthy right now, you know, even if you're getting better right now, right? If you're able to pray for somebody else right now, if you can encourage someone else right now. We're talking about overeating, but thank God we have something in the refrigerator to eat. You understand? We have a place to stay. We really are blessed. Even in the midst of pandemic, we are still blessed. Even in the midst of being at home, we are still blessed. And so it really forced me to do some corrective action. You're right. And I'm the pastor. I'm supposed to be the one telling her, girl, you're so blessed. But that day, you know, I had to get a redirect. Amen. Because God will turn it around. And that's what happened. And so I guess I want to close this conversation by saying, you know, absolutely, you know, the name of this is Women, Wellness, and COVID-19. Yes, we are women. And yes, our wellness is important. Our spiritual wellness, you know, our prayer life, you know, our teaching life, our fasting life, our listening and worshiping virtually, physically taking care of ourselves, exercising, drinking water, you know, going for a walk, reading, breathing, painting, cooking, doing something for ourselves mentally, and psychologically, doing those mental exercises that allow us to release the frustration that we hold on to begin to release that trauma, to go back in our childhoods after asking all of those questions and pull up those hurts that are still dictating how we show up in the world, right? That this is our time to be well and to recognize that, yes, we are in the midst of a pandemic, no doubt about it. Yes, it's affecting us every single day, no doubt about it. But we show up strong. We show up strong even when we don't want to. Sometimes you just don't feel like being strong. I don't feel like being strong. But even if I don't feel like being strong, that strength is still there. It's the strength of my mother. It's the strength of my grandmother. It's the strength of my great, 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 great grandmother. It's that blood that flows in us that reminds us that we don't have a choice but to stand up and fight every day, that we don't have a choice but to show up as our best selves, knowing that God is standing tall at us. So even when we're weak, we're still strong. Even when we're scared, we're still courageous. Even when we're doubtful, we're still confident because we know that we are the beloved of God, that God's Spirit rests on us, and that in us God finds favor. So in the midst of this global pandemic, let us not forget how we show up every day, how we wake up every day. What B say, I woke up like this. You woke up like this, girl. You woke up strong. You woke up a conqueror. You woke up, with the God that is in you standing tall in you in a way that you don't have a choice but to continue to move forward, to try your best, to give yourself a pass when you fail. Get yourself back up again and keep it moving forward, trusting that the best is yet to come. Amen.
Amen.
That was a little mini sermon.
Yes.
I just want to thank our sister, Eboné Carrington, for coming on with us today as we talked about women wellness and COVID-19. Ladies, I hope this was helpful to you. I hope you feel encouraged. Just giving a shout out to Eboné's family, to her beautiful mother, a G2G power woman, her beautiful baby husband, beautiful baby boy. And for all of you all at Harlem Hospital, we are praying for y'all. We love you, to your staff, to your doctors and nurses, and certainly all of the patients that are there with COVID symptoms and those who have other health challenges. We love you and we're praying for you, and you are not by yourselves.
Thank you so much. From all the women in the workplace, thank you and stay strong.
Yes. God bless you. All right. Have a great night. I love you all. And we'll see you tomorrow night, 7 p.m. for Bible study. Yes. Okay. Have a blessed evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.